Part 3, Where Silence Hurts. Adolescence arrived like an unexpected storm. Gone were the quiet mornings, filled with comfort. Now, I preferred music blasting through headphones, doors slammed shut, and arguments that echoed louder than any pair of shoes ever could. I no longer waited for the sound of his footsteps in the morning. I wanted space, independence. I rolled my eyes at his routines, his outdated shirts, the way he double-checked the door locks each night. He didn't understand the world I was trying to live in, full of fast technology, loud expression, and emotional words shouted on social media and teenage group chats. He didn't even own a smartphone. "You don't get it," I snapped once when he questioned my choice of friends. "You live in the past. You've never even said I love you." He didn't respond, just stood there, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the wall behind me. That infuriated me more. I wanted fireworks. I wanted a fight, something explosive to prove he cared. But silence, his endless silence, felt like a kind of emotional starvation. Our conversations, if they could be called that, shrank to the bare minimum. Dinner's on the table. "Don't forget your key. There's gas in the truck." He never asked where I went after school. Never told me to be careful, or to come home early. Sometimes, I thought he'd stop caring altogether. I began testing his limits, staying out later, skipping meals, talking back. But he never raised his voice. One evening, during a particularly brutal argument over college applications, I wanted to apply for art school in the city. He thought it was
risky and unrealistic.
I exploded. "You don't care what I want." I shouted. "You've never tried to understand me. You've never even said the words, 'I love you,' once in your life. You're just there, like a wall, cold, useless." I was shaking, hands clenched, my throat raw from yelling. I expected him to lash out, to finally let all those years of unspoken things burst open like a dam. But he just stared at me, not blankly, not even angrily, just silently. His lips moved slightly, as if trying to form words that couldn't quite make it past whatever barrier he'd built over the years. And then he turned around and walked away. I stormed into my room, slammed the door, and cried into my pillow. I wanted him to chase after me, to sit beside me, to say anything. But the hallway remained quiet. The next morning, I packed a small bag, shoved in my phone charger and a change of clothes, and left. I didn't go far, just to a friend's house across town. I told them I needed a place to crash for the night. Her parents didn't ask questions. That night, I lay awake on a too-soft couch, staring at the ceiling, pretending I felt free. I told myself I didn't care what my dad thought, that he probably didn't even notice I was gone. But I kept checking my phone. No messages, no missed calls. The next morning, around 6 a.m., guilt crept in like sunlight under the blinds. I quietly gathered my things and walked home. The streets were still wet from an early rain, and my shoes soaked through in minutes. My fingers were cold. When I got to our house, the porch light was still on. The door was locked. I stood there, heart racing, expecting a scolding, a disappointed face, or worse, complete indifference. But the door opened before I even knocked. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, then stepped aside. There, at the threshold, were two small things I'll never forget: a pair of dry socks and a warm, buttered roll wrapped in a paper towel. And next to them, his shoes, neatly polished, soles still damp from the driveway. He had gone out early, searching for me in the rain, still silent, still showing love in the only way he knew. I stepped inside, unable to speak. He didn't ask where I'd been, didn't lecture or guilt me, just pointed at the socks, turned toward the kitchen, and started the coffee pot. That morning, I cried for the first time in front of him in years. Not from sadness, not even from shame, but from the overwhelming, aching realization that maybe silence wasn't the absence of love, it was the shape his love had always taken. After that day, something shifted. We still didn't talk much, but now his silences didn't feel like punishment. They felt like space, open, safe, and waiting for me to fill it, if I wanted to. One night, I passed by his room on the way to get a glass of water. His door was slightly open. I paused. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, holding something in his lap. It was a shoebox. Inside were small mementos. A picture of me from 3rd grade. A drawing I'd made in kindergarten of me and Daddy, with stick figures and giant shoes. A dried, crumbling flower from a science project. A program from a high school art exhibit I thought he'd ignored. And a note. It read, "I don't know how to say what I feel, so I try to leave footprints instead." I didn't enter the room, didn't ask about the box. But that night, I stood a little longer in the hallway before heading to bed, and I listened, not just for the sound of his shoes, but for the heart inside them. Part 4. Footsteps that fade. The last summer before I left for college passed slower than any season before it. Everything was softer, quieter. The anger between us had cooled, melted into something gentler. There were still long silences, but now they were companionable, like two people sitting on the same bench watching the world drift by. Sometimes, we sat on the back porch in the evenings, drinking tea. He would drink as the same way he always had, black, no sugar, no milk. I'd grown used to it too, out of habit more than taste. That summer, I stopped trying to change the little things about him. I just watched how his hands trembled ever so slightly when he lifted a cup, how he tilted his head when listening to the neighborhood kids play in the street, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips, how he always checked the mailbox, even when he didn't expect anything, like hope was a routine you had to keep practicing. One morning, I woke up early and heard him in the garage. The familiar rhythm of metal tools clinking, soft sanding, wood creaking under his touch. He was building something. I didn't ask what. I just watched him through the crack in the door. His movements were slower than they used to be. He had to pause more often, wipe his forehead, rub his wrists. But there was purpose in every motion. He was crafting something with care, as he always had. No shortcuts, no complaints. That night, after dinner, he handed me a small wooden box.
"I made this for you,"
he said, voice barely above a whisper. It was smooth, simple, without decoration. Inside, it was lined with soft cloth. There was nothing in it yet.
"It's not much.
He added, then looked down.
Just figured you need something to hold your things. For school."
I ran my fingers along the grain of the wood. It was beautiful in the way old things are beautiful. Not flashy, but made to last. "Thank you," I said. We sat in silence again, but this time it felt like a full conversation. Move-in day came faster than I expected. We packed a car in the early morning, while the sky was still gray. I kept checking the back seat, making sure I had everything. Clothes, toothbrush, the box he made. He didn't fuss, didn't hover, just lifted each suitcase like it weighed nothing, even though I could tell his back had started giving him trouble. When we finished, he stood by the car, hands in his pockets.
"You'll be okay,"
he said, eyes fixed on a crack in the driveway. I nodded. "You too." He stepped forward and, to my surprise, reached out and pulled me into a hug. It was brief, a little awkward, but real. Solid. Then, just as quickly, he let go, took a step back, and tapped the top of the car.
"You drive careful.
"I will."
And don't skip oil changes.
"I won't."
And if it gets too cold, wear 2 pairs of socks."
I smiled, eyes already wet. "Okay, Dad." He didn't wave as I pulled away. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching. And behind him, I saw the shoes, his old, worn pair, lined up neatly by the front door. College life was fast and loud. Dorm rooms, lectures, new friends. Everything moved at a speed that didn't leave room for reflection. For the first few weeks, I barely remembered to call home. When I finally did, it was late on a Thursday. I was pacing around the hallway outside my room, phone pressed to my ear. He answered after the second ring. "Hey," I said. "Hey." We were quiet. Then he asked,
"You eating all right?
"Yeah, the food here's okay." He grunted.
You making friends?"
"Some. Yeah."
"That's good.
Pause.
You get the new tires?"
"I will," I lied. He chuckled softly.
"Don't wait till snow hits."
We didn't talk long. We never did. But when I hung up, I stood there in the hallway for a long time, phone still warm in my hand, just listening to the silence after his voice, missing the rhythm of his footsteps in the hallway back home. A month later, I got the call. It was early morning. My roommate was still asleep. The sun hadn't come up. The hospital. A fall. Internal bleeding. Complications. He didn't suffer. It was quick. That's what they said. That's what everyone said. I didn't cry right away. Didn't scream. Just sat down on the cold dorm floor and stared at the pattern of the tiles. The next few days blurred. Flights. Flowers. The house. Everything looked smaller. In his bedroom, I found the shoebox again. Only this time, there was something new inside. A small, folded note. It read,
I may not always have the words, but I hope you always knew I was walking beside you. Every step.
I pressed the paper to my chest and finally let the sobs come. The funeral was simple, just like he would have wanted. No big speeches, no elaborate flowers, just people who knew him, really knew him, standing in quiet remembrance. At the wake, someone told me, your father was the kindest man I ever met. He didn't talk much, but when he fixed your fence or your truck, it was like he was giving you a part of his own hands. Another said, he once drove across town just to bring me soup when I was sick. Didn't even stay. Just left it on the porch with a note. Keep warm. I nodded, smiled, listened. And with each story, I saw him more clearly. Not as the quiet man I used to misunderstand, but as someone whose silence had always been full of love. Back in my dorm room, I placed a wooden box he'd made on the windowsill. Inside it, I kept a note. A photo. One of his old keys. And the last pair of shoelaces he ever wore. I don't remember the exact sound of his footsteps anymore. But some nights, when I'm walking alone on a quiet street, I hear echoes beside me. Not loud, not heavy, just steady, comforting. And I know he's still there. In every choice I make with care. In every silence I let breathe. In every step I take, without needing to look back.